He'll find the common ground that we know is already there that may just be hidden by some other. There may be some clouds in the way, but find a way to park those clouds and find you some sunshine. As we do, I want you to keep in mind that anything that you say in this room is going to be held confidential. All right? I won't be called as a witness outside. I won't release any of my notes outside. So you can feel safe to really work with kind of reckless abandon with each other, okay? When we leave here today, any notes that I take are going to be destroyed. I would expect that you would do the same thing. You've both already signed the agreement to mediate that stated the same thing for each of you. As far as ground rules, this is while we're a more relaxed environment, we're going to try and keep it respectful, okay? That no, if we feel that emotions are taking control and it's escalating, then I would ask both of you, your counsels as well as you're here to help your clients, let's maybe take a step back. If we need to take a break for a moment, we can. So we'll try not to talk over each other, and it'll be my role to keep that from happening just so everyone's voices are heard. If you do need to speak to me privately at any point, if you feel that there's something wrong with the mediation, or if you feel there's some information you want to discuss with me without the other party, you can do so. If you call for a caucus, we'll release the other party, we'll let them go out of the room, and then we can have a private conversation for a few moments. And then I'll offer the same thing to the other party if they'd like to share some information as well. And that is really just the basics of it. And I don't want to keep a lot of time from you, so I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourselves. And when you do so, please, I want you to really introduce yourself, not just as who you are, but explain to me, because I don't know all the details, and a little bit to your counterpart, where you're coming from, more on a personal level. You know, what this dispute really means to you. We can all read filings and papers and whatnot back and forth, but it doesn't really communicate who you are and what you're really looking for. So I'd like to start with Arista, if you are okay with that.
Thank you, David. I'm Arista, as you already know. I'm currently employed with GRO International, and they've contracted me out to Victory Sports. And from where I stand, I really do not have a problem with rhythm as a person. If there's any background to why we're here, it's because there's a problem with the expectations that you have and the possibility of me ever matching them. I want to continue this relationship that I have with GRO International. I want to continue working for Victory Sports. However, I do not blame you for the kind of expectations that you have, but I think that since they're a little unrealistic for me, I would want to continue my employment, but let's say under a different dress.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, David, for that wonderful introduction. I'm Pat. I'm the legal counsel here to represent the interests of my client, Arista. And we've all gathered here to arrive at an amicable solution, as both parties would not want this to go out in the media, especially JWI, since it's a really reputed staffing organization that's providing staffing solutions all across the globe, and especially in India. Now, on a personal note as well, I've realized that I was a perfectionist in my childhood and I had to undergo therapy. So I realized what my client is actually going through today to meet those unmatchable standards that are really difficult for a normal employee to achieve. And I realized that the company would obviously demand high efficiency from its employees. However, if in this session, if we could just negotiate on the standards that were set for the employees and the plight that my client had to go through during this entire process, it would be wonderful.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Arista. Thank you so much, Pat. And thank you so much for sharing as well. But before I continue, I would like to thank you, David, for actually giving both Arista and me a quick run-through of what to expect in today's session. And it inspires confidence in me that we're going to be in safe hands today. And so I would just want to use some time to give a background to where I come from and why there are some standards in place in Victory Sports. So to me, a logistics facility is a lot like a watch. There are a lot of fine, small parts working together in harmony in order to make sure that the watch works. And if any part does not work, does not live up to the quality or standard that it has to, the entire watch will fail. And a logistics facility, in many cases, does tend to have literally a lot of moving parts. And that is why I have this philosophy that if we are going to be successful as a company, as a facility, it is important to have quality and standards. this was the mentality that I adopted in Murdoch Shifting, my previous workplace, and I experienced great success there. And that is the reason why GWI even brought me on board as a director of Victory Sports. When I came into Victory Sports, I brought over this philosophy, and that is when I thought that as the largest logistics facility in India, the standards and quality were even more important. I do hear your concerns, Arista, and I can understand that in many cases, standards can seem hard to meet, but I was very sure and certain that I had to be fair to everyone who was working within the facility. And that is why these standards that I implemented were implemented uniformly across the entire facility. Now, I'm very concerned as to why you have certain qualms with the standards, and I would like to find out more eventually in the later part of this session. But I would like to say that I am very interested in seeing how we can put this incident behind us.
Thank you, Rhythm. And I think we can all see that he's laid out very well the situation that JWI and Rhythm is coming from, but also he's shown to all of us here at the table today how invested he is in this mediation process, along together with rebuilding the relationship between himself and Arista. Now, of course, we have to talk about the claim that's brought us here to the table in the first place. And to that end, our legal position is simple. Arista, your claim against Rhythm has no merit, simply because there are three reasons. The first, that the employment standards which have been given to you as an assistant manager were agreed to you willingly when you first came on board with JWI. The second is that these standards were fully disclosed to you during the time of your interview. And the third was that all other employees who are also occupying a similar assistant managerial role are given the same standards that you have. And to note, Freedom has not had any complaints filed against him in the past 6 months. For these reasons, we strongly believe that any claim made against us will be ruled in our favor. But that being said, we've recognized wholeheartedly that you have certain grievances that you'd like to explore, and we'd like to explore them with you as well. So, and of course, David, you've also mentioned that we ought to be able to speak freely, to operate freely in this space. And we're here with an open mind, and we hope also that you will be coming to us with an open mind as well and have this sort of dialogue that we're looking for. At the end of the day, I think I can speak confidently on behalf of Rhythm that we're looking forward to the process and looking forward to see where we can go forward from here.
So before we go any further, first I'd like to just kind of both thank you for something that I heard from both of you, and it was really there's no personal animosity either way. So we're really just looking at facts, which is fantastic because facts aren't emotionless, right? So that's, if we can keep that down, that's a good thing. I understand people have emotions, and this can be an emotionally charged situation because things can feel personal, but I do appreciate the fact you both recognize that you don't have anything against each other. And I remind you, that's actually the second thing you've agreed on today, already. Okay, you both agreed to come. Nobody forced you.
Yes.
So that's great. We have 2 yeses already, okay? But before we go any further, I want to clarify just for myself. So I heard a little bit, when you started out, you said you had an issue with the performance standards themselves. Okay, so to help me understand, are you currently working with JWI? Are you still currently working at their Victory Sports facility?
Yes, and that's the future of the employment is what we're going to discuss today.
Okay, and so that's your understanding as well, is that really we're talking about the future of employment?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, so if we were going to set just kind of an agenda to keep us on pace, would that be the thing that you think is the most important to you, or would there be something else that you thought was more important? Is the future of your employment really the major factor for you?
Certainly, because there is a lawsuit, and I think one of the points on the agenda is if we agree on my future employment, then whether or not we drop the lawsuit will be a major point of discussion.
Okay, and do you agree as well?
I think perhaps for Mr. Rhythm, if we're looking to talk about lawsuit, we want to talk about the future of your employment first. We really want to understand the claims that Arista has brought. We want to have that laid out between both the parties. Maybe you'd like for that to be the first agenda item.
Okay. So would you like me to put it up on the board? Are you comfortable with what we have? I mean, I'll leave that up to you. If you would like a visual representation, I'm more than happy to provide it.
I think that would be great actually. It would really help us.
Well, then let's do that. So we said future employment, but then there was also a subtext that you put on that. If we were going to talk about future employment, then we needed to talk, I think we agreed, we needed to talk about the suit itself.
Absolutely.
And that will include discussing the standards and what exactly the concerns underlying them
Okay, so if we have to agree on one though, can we discuss, are we gonna discuss the standards before the suit? Or do we have to discuss the suit before we move forward? I mean, if the suit is really at the root of the whole thing, if we clear everything else up, then I assume that the suit would be the last thing we would really cover, yes?
So if, Arista, correct me if I'm wrong, but the underlying reason behind the suit in the first place are the standards in place. Right. So I think that I personally would want to know what exactly the problems are.
So the standards work for you as well? And obviously, I mean, the lawsuit and not the suit that we're all wearing, so for expediency's sake, we'll leave it there. All right. So as we're going to, the standards seem to be what's in play. You said you had some questions around what the issue was with the standards themselves.
Yes.
I obviously can't answer that. So Arista, can you kind of define for them what kind of problems you had specifically with those standards?
Rhythm, as you were pointing out, we'd like to run a watch with parts in it. No parts work with equal speeds. The beauty of a watch is that there's multiple parts which do multiple things at multiple speeds. That's exactly where I feel some sort of disagreement lies, because in your paradigm probably the standards that you've set for all your employees are justifiable, but from where I stand and with my experience with you in MODOCs as well, I feel they're a little unrealistic and a little hard to get, because we need to realize that in projects this big, they're usually based on projections. Now when projects come to materialize in the real world, those figures change, which is why what we have to deliver is in essence also changes. But my problem with the system is those standards don't. Now I understand for you to change an entire system, an entire ideology that you've been working with for the past several years is extremely difficult. But we also have information that Victory Sports itself is coming up with, let's say, a sister organization. If in case you're not the director there, what I'm looking for is to be employed there on very similar terms.
Okay, thank you so much, Arista. And what I heard is that the standards you felt were unrealistic and hard to get. Is there a specific example that you would like to refer to when you are citing these problems? Because to me, unrealistic and hard to get are slightly difficult to define. And I'm really looking to actually improve and clarify what the employment standards are within the facility.
So as I said, everything that you delegate to us is in some sort of projection, and because most of the experience that we've had stems from MODOCs, and there we have confidentiality, which is why I cannot disclose what happened there. But in terms of my future employment, do you think it's a possibility for you to employ me in a sister organization?
In terms of the exact reasons why the complaint was filed initially as well, so on the 9th day of employment itself, the complaint was filed because my client was made to feel uncomfortable. Now, the offer that was made to my client was to work at other similar facilities. However, no information about those facilities was provided, and as a result of no knowledge, my client was not in a position to take a valid decision. Now, the suit exactly has been filed for hostile work environment and the inability to perform the duties that my client was supposed to perform. And due to the same, my client is seeking to have a transfer to another facility, which Victory Sports is actually planning to open.
So if I can ask, just very briefly, again, when you were talking about the standards and some other history, I guess you said at MODOCs, I know you mentioned there was a confidentiality agreement. Does anything about, and I'd have to ask your attorney, does anything about that confidentiality agreement, I mean, we're in a confidential space. If it's something that you think may help us actually move forward, is there anything about that that would really, I don't know, anything to keep you from revealing that in this space, as all of us are sworn to not bring it out anywhere, and I can't mention it. If it's something that you think might advance it, I would encourage you to do so, but I would also, tell you to rely on your counsel's judgment.
I would highly recommend, in my client's best interest, to let that information be not revealed, as it is of personal interest to my client.
And I will
David,
defer to you on that.
If you understand the background of the two employments, that's also extremely different. So let's say, even if I do reveal information, there was a shipping organization, this is a sports organization, the kind of work is so different that revealing it won't help us. It's just a waste of time in my opinion.
Okay.
And if I could just respond very quickly. First, I appreciate the fact that you understand the confidentiality agreement and you don't think that it will be worth the time to actually disclose all these details in a setting where we're talking about Victory Sports as a sports-related logistics facility. I understand that. But what the perspective that I'm coming from is the fact that these are the same standards that I had in place for 6 months before you came in, when this facility was first created. And even then, I felt that the facility was doing so well that Victory Sports decided to expand itself even further. And in that span of 6 months, we didn't have any complaints related to these standards that were put in place. And I also heard you talking about a sister organization that Victory Sports is currently planning to come up with and create. Do you have any more details about this sister organization? Because we don't seem to know much about it at this point.
Just to clarify, at least from JWI's HR perspective, no such evidence has been discovered thus far before this session. So we're really curious as to what sort of specific details you can lend to our discussion. I think that will give us a lot more clarity.
In terms of what we know, I think you're in a better position to reveal to us if there's a sister organization being discussed and being implemented. Because if there is, then I see the future of my employment with that sister organization. Apart from whether or not we have evidence, once again, setting standards in and of itself is a very subjective idea. Right? For example, we understand that you lend a lot of credibility to the efficiency that your organization has. But at some point, and I want this to be a point of discussion today also, Adam, if you could take note of this, is that the kind of standards that we have in not just in Victory Sports, but generally prevailing throughout the country, is that while you impose these standards, I understand that people are matching them, but at what cost? The idea is that to impose a standard on someone, and because their livelihood depends on it, people go above and beyond reasonable capacities to match them. I understand that you expect things of us, but I think a certain problem lies in the fact that, and I think Anirudh could explain this, Pat could explain this better, but the idea is that I think we need help from you in developing people's skills in their vocational training, so that it's not just me. I'm sure not just Victory Sports, but JobWorks International has a huge future in front of it. So every single employee that it hires, instead of picking them on why they're not matching standards, I think a better way to go about it for you could be training them to do better and probably revising standards that you set for them.
Actually, Arista, I'm hearing two different things from you, and just correct me if I'm wrong if that's the case. The first is with regards to any sister organizations and ways that perhaps we could deploy you differently in this organization. Is that correct?
Right.
That's the first thing. And the second is with regards to standards, how they're subjective and how they might apply to the people differently, to different effects. Now, with regards to any sister organizations and future work opportunities, it's certainly something that we want to discuss at some point during this discussion. But of course, we're here first to talk about the claim, so let's focus a bit more on the standards first. And you talked a lot about confidentiality, and David has also talked about how this is a confidential space. It's for us to bring out information that we feel is going to help move this discussion forward. And to that end, I think, although at this point we recognize your hesitance with talking about your employment at Modox, Mr. Rhythm, perhaps this may not necessarily be the case for us.
Yes, exactly, and thanks so much, Harvey. So the perspective that we are coming from, and David rightly pointed out, is that the fact that this is a confidential setting, and we think, and Harvey did advise me, that it will be safe for us to disclose certain things that happen in Modox, and our own review of performance standards within Modox, that we can review in today's session to maybe speed things up a bit and clarify where we are coming from. So after this entire situation developed, we did our own digging, and we discovered that Arista, there were some shortcomings in your performance at Modox as well. And the training standards, the expectations and standards in place in Modox back then are the same ones that we have implemented in Victory Sports. And what we are seeing is potentially a trend in the fact that and I accept your point here, that there might be a lack of training, which is why you are underperforming. And this is something that we are quite open to discussing on how we can further develop our own trainees and the own people who are working under us. But right now, our stand is the fact that the standards have been implemented. By and large, everything has been going fine and smoothly. You seem to be an outlier, I would say, in this case.
Just to move back a little in this session, you just stated that it has been 6 months and there has been no complaint. In my experience as a lawyer, Arista was also recruited later after Victory Sports was started. So do you think 6 months is a viable period for you to judge whether any complaints have been received or not, and whether any complaints not being received is a sign of the standards being fine, firstly? And secondly, so I would just like to narrate a short story here that my mother used to tell me in my childhood, and that I was telling Arista as well before we came to this session. So there is a place in Salomon Islands where when they want to fell down a tree, what they do is they stand around the tree and curse it as much as they want, not worrying about anything. They don't use any axes, they don't use any tools, and in a few days itself, the tree automatically dies. Now, do you think, in your opinion, not having any training options or any training mechanisms for the people who are not performing up to the standards is a viable way of just removing people from your organization, or whether there can be an implementation of any methodology where people who are not performing as per the standards can be helped or their performance improved?
Okay, so I'll take the questions in part. The first is pertaining to the 6 months, whether that's sufficient. I think the very fact that Arista, you yourself, within, I think, 1 week of working with Victory Sports, were able to allege that their performance standards are unattainable, from my perspective, simply goes to show that 6 months is more than enough if people and employees feel the standards are too high to be met. And I hope that will assuage your concern. The second thing is going to the story that you mentioned, and surprisingly, it reminded me of a movie I watched, a Bollywood movie, very interesting. And pertaining to that story, absolutely not. I don't think that we use such a methodology to filter our employees. That's not where I'm coming from. I respect everyone who works under me. This might be something that in hindsight we see as a problem, and we are willing to fix it, because if we didn't think anything is wrong with our standards, we won't be here today. So I want to work forward with you, and Arista, you talked about wanting to work in a sister organization, and I was just curious if we were to put where I'm coming from is the fact that you talked about wanting to get some training, you talked about wanting to work in a separate organization away from Victory Sports. If we were to able to perhaps offer you a solution where both these necessities are met, would that be something you're willing to collaborate with us on?
And actually, I'm sorry, just before you get to that point, I want to clarify something just for myself again. When you said you wanted to talk about the standards, I mean, we both agreed we wanted to discuss the standards, and I want to go back. Did we want to address, are we wanting to address the standards moving forward? I mean, assuming that when we settle this today, that we're going to continue with employment with JWI. So are we better served in covering, what the standards were in the past and how the standards were or were not met in the past? Or are we better served addressing, what the standards are currently and how they may not be tweaked, or whatever, the training you've discussed and what have you, and how that may be implemented to help things moving forward? I'm just, if you could clarify for me.
If I'm at to what Adam just said, the past is in the past. As I stated when I started speaking, is that I hold you in high regard. The standards that you have, probably in your paradigm, completely fit. Whether they're acceptable by every other person and whether or not they're matched by every person is a discussion which we don't really need to have. In terms of just one clarification with what you said, because I'm such a fan of sports, and I think pertaining to a field that is not just an employment opportunity but also work of passion, I'd be willing to continue working with Victory Sports itself, because you did make offers for me to join other sister client organizations that JWI has. But the only problem with that is, one, Victory Sports is a huge organization. As Rhythm said, it already has started expanding its operations, 6 months coming into force. So I believe that, one, my love for sports, and two, my prospects at Victory Sports, because of the success that it has and because it is India's largest facility, is something that I want to focus on, and I want to continue working for Victory Sports very specifically.
Just to clarify. So your reason for wanting to stay on with Victory Sports pertains specifically to your passion for sports.
Right. So let's say if you had a problem with me matching those standards, I personally believe that once you work for something you love, because I know for a fact that Pat's a musician, he would have done much better had he not been a lawyer. So if I work for sports, I personally believe that I will be able to match those standards. There can be some revising, there can be some training, but I think that will be a position that both of us will be happy in, because I'm sure you do not want to continue with the lawsuit itself.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that you're keen to work in victory sports because it's sports related, it's expanding, so there's good prospects of career progression, and moving forward, the issue of dropping a lawsuit is contingent upon you working within victory sports. Is that what I'm hearing?
Could you please repeat that?
So 3 things. First is the fact that victory sports is sports related.
Right.
The second thing is the prospect of career progression.
Right.
And the third thing that I'm hearing is the fact that the entire issue of a lawsuit against JWI is contingent upon the fact that you have to continue working with victory sports.
Certainly, Pritham, if you are to look at from where I stand, if you are to step in my shoes, there's only 2 ways for me. It's either continuing to work for you, or it's the lawsuit, the claims which I think Pat can explain to you, but there's no point winning a battle if the war is lost. I still want us to continue working together, and let's say if we meet agreeable terms, then the first thing that we do is drop the lawsuit.
I think we're hearing a lot of very interesting things from Arista and her counsel, but I think also that in light of wanting to keep this discussion moving forward, we'd probably like to call for a caucus, if that's all right with you. If there's anything to discuss.
That's fine. Are you okay with that right now?
Yeah.
Okay. If you would. We've got just a few minutes left, so what would you like to discuss?
So the reason why we call this caucus is because from what I'm hearing from Arista, it's important for her to continue working at victory sports, and the career prospects itself seem very promising to her. Now the problem that we are facing right now, and this is something that I want to be kept confidential between us, at least for the time being, is the fact that we cannot keep her within the company because JWI feels that with the existing legal tensions and the tensions between the relationship between employer and employee, it's something that is very sensitive, and we do not want to have a similar dynamic continuing on within victory sports. So our perspective is that we have to find Arista, and we are open to finding Arista a substitute company, a sister company that can similarly fit her needs for maybe being sports related and offering some form of career progression. The underlying problem then is that the career progression might not be as strong in terms of how favorable the pay might be, and that is something that we're willing to discuss with them. But it's the entire issue of banking the entire lawsuit on the idea of continuing to work with victory sports. And beyond that, the reason why this lawsuit is a sensitive issue for us is the fact that we had a contract, JWI signed a contract with victory sports, wherein any lawsuit that causes a reputational loss to victory sports would cause victory sports to sever all ties with JWI. And this would result in millions of dollars of lost revenue. And this is something that I think we are, of course, trying to avoid. Yeah. And that is why I call for this caucus, because we think these issues are very pertinent. And moving forward, I'm also looking for a promotion to regional directorship. And I feel that all these issues can culminate into restricting my own career progression. So these are all very sensitive issues that I didn't feel comfortable sharing within the during the shared or joint session itself.
So, just to sum, right? My client has seen many factors leading to this dispute, but at the same time, he thinks that there are many options we can employ moving forward, and we're hopeful that we can communicate this to Arista in a way that makes her more amenable to continuing her employment elsewhere outside of victory sports entirely. Not to say we don't have options. There are places like Performax, for example, which is also sporting related. So I think really our concern here is perhaps, David, when we come back into the open session, maybe you could help. If there are further difficulties in communicating with Arista, perhaps you could help us with getting our point across in a way that's more amenable. That'd be all right?
So just to help me understand, when you say that Arista can't continue to work at Victory Sports, can't continue to work at Victory Sports for JWI just as a whole, but they're allowed to continue working with JWI potentially.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's merely in this specific instance with regards to victory sports, which is why we're coming up with other options as well. We want to entertain her concerns and making sure that both Rhythm and Arista can continue their employment.
So, but is Arista's complaint about the employment currently at JWI, is that related to the standards specifically for JWI, or are they related specifically through, and please don't take this the wrong way, but are they related to the standards and you? Because I know there's been a little bit of the apparent you have somewhat of a shared history, and we don't have the details on that, and that's fine, but is it directly related to you or directly related to JWI?
I would say it's directly related to me and the standards that I'm setting in Victory Esports itself, but that is not the problem here. The problem is, and this is why I was clarifying with Arista, whether the lawsuit and her dropping the lawsuit is contingent upon her working within Victory Sports, which she did say yes to. And the problem then is whether or not JWI itself is open to that idea, which it is not. And me as merely an employee of JWI, I'm simply here to pass on that message that in a situation where there's this tension between Arista and me already, Arista cannot continue working within Victory Sports.
Okay. And are you prepared to make some sort of offer to Arista? And if that offer is not working at JWI, are you prepared for what happens if their outright refusal leads to a lawsuit?
What we are prepared for is to give them an offer. We have a multitude of things that we are willing to put on the table, but it's simply, the problem right now is to even convince her to try to consider other sister organizations. Because I think that what will bog her down and what might slow down this entire session is the fact that she'll be looking too much at career progression and looking at the fact that Victory Sports is the biggest logistics facility in India itself. And so this is why we needed your help to maybe help to package this information into something that's more palatable and something that she can receive on a more positive note.
Okay, so when we come back together, is that something you'd like me to present, or do you want me to try and create an opening for you to present that?
I would say that, Javi, would this be okay if David does it?
I think that'd be a great idea. I'm sure she'd be more open to hear from you.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, I'll take, if you don't have anything else, then let's bring them back in and see if they have anything they'd like to say to me in private as well.
Okay, sure.
So, you've had a few minutes, obviously, to yourselves. And I've had a few minutes to discuss some things with them. I think we've got some interesting things that you probably need to come together as a group and really discuss moving forward. But what specifically would you like to bring to me?
David, because I'm probably not very comfortable here on out discussing what has happened. I want the idea of bygones, let bygones be bygones, be the bottom rock of this negotiation. The reason being, when I was employed at Modox, I filed a complaint there as well about whether or not those performance standards were all right. When I got a reply to that complaint, they told me that Vidam wasn't the one setting them. It was a joint committee that was setting those standards. And in some way they felt that I couldn't match those standards. However, I know for a fact that Modox has an internal policy of not revealing that information to anybody. In those terms, I understand that Rhythm has that information, but Modox will not officially reveal it. But considering that this is an entirely new background for me to be working in, I certainly feel that I can do a lot better. But I think that because there's already a spoiled rapport between me and Rhythm and how we worked in the past, it's a sister organization where there's a different boss, there's better training, there's standards which match industry standards, and I think I'll be able to be in a much better position. And the primary thing that I'm looking for is to continue my employment instead of barging on the lawsuit.
Okay, and you've said this before, they have a sister organization, but they seem to be a little confused on that topic. So could you explain that? You say there's this, as in they have, JWI has a sister organization, or Victory Sports has a, when you say a sister organization, what do you mean?
So from what I know, and this is the information that I have, is that Victory Sports itself is planning a new facility. Rhythm Sounds is the director of the initial facility that Victory Sports had. If there's a new organization, a new facility that's to come up under Victory Sports itself, which I think they're in the planning for, then I'd like to be employed in that facility as an assistant manager.
And is it my understanding that really it's not so much an issue with Victory Sports and maybe Victory Sports' standards as it is that you can't work, that you feel you cannot work with Rhythm specifically? Is that?
Yeah, the crux of the idea is that I think Rhythm's standards are something that are a little difficult to match, which is why we initially had that problem. But I do not really want that to come up, because then it's just assigning blame on one another, and I really do not want to be going that way.
And the sister concerns that my client was talking about right now, they are the client facilities that are associated with JWI for a long time now. They are Health Glow, Perform Max, Not Lost. all these facilities where there was a prospective offer where my client was offered work. However, the details of that work were not provided to my client, and as a result of that, my client could not take a decision on whether he wanted to work there or not. So, as a result of that, the offer was declined.
Okay. So, if we can get some more details around some of those, maybe that'd be something that's helpful to you, if we can get some more details around this other work.
Even if it does, I don't think it entirely helps my case. So what I'm looking for is to continue my employment with Victory Sports. Let's say even if they share that information, one, the idea of progression in employment, and two, working for what you love, is something that I think is best fulfilled if my employment at Victory Sports continues at a different facility.
Okay. And you prepared for, let's be honest, you prepared for what happens if they just tell you no. I mean, it's thinking forward. What do you have a plan B for if they just outright tell you no?
In terms, I will have to look for an alternative employment opportunity elsewhere. But what we want you to understand is that it reflects badly on me because I recently quit one job where there was a complaint filed. Then I joined another organization, a complaint was filed, I quit again. So a third place that I applied to, the prospects aren't very bright. So if this relationship is to continue, it helps me in great prospect.
And if it doesn't, then we most probably have to go to court, and we'll have to claim 5 years worth of pay plus the legal costs that we incur in fighting that suit.
But really what it sounds like what you're more interested in is continuing employment.
Continuing
It's-
employment.
and saving face almost, really. We don't want to go to a third employer.
Yes.
Okay. I think we've got some good information. I think we can bring them in. I think we may be able to move forward with some things.
Sure.
Okay, so welcome back. We've had a good discussion with both sides. And the great news I have for both of you is this. You're much closer than you probably think you are to being where you want to be. So as we discussed earlier, we had some other information that I would like to kind of, and we discussed as well. You stated earlier that you really wanted to continue doing something you loved, and Victory was that, because you just have a love of sports, correct?
Right.
And that none of these other offers that were made to you were acceptable, partially because we don't know anything about them.
Exactly.
What if we could find a way, between the two of us, between the three of us, what if we could find a way to match that thing that you love with continued employment, with JWI?
Right.
Would that be something that would be of interest to you?
If it's in Victory Sports itself, that's something that really interests me.
Okay. Well, and while I can't make any promises on anything, I think I saw your eyes perk up just a little bit when we said something about continuing to work with sports, right? So as far as details around any of that, would you like to discuss some of that?
Yes, I think I would. So it's good to hear that your love for sports is something that is still weighing very heavily with you. And we do have an offer. And this is not within Victory Sports. This is a company that is separate from Victory Sports, it's distinct, but it's one that JWI contracts with, and it's called PerformX. And what this company deals with is ultra distance runners. And so it is a similar sort of company. It's a bit smaller than Victory Sports, not much smaller. The pay differential is per month is barely under $400, or just over $400. And we are willing to offer you training as well, which is also one of the things that you stated earlier on before the caucuses. There's something that you're looking for, and this will automatically imply that with training, your performance will be better and your career progression will be even stronger. So is this something that we're going to consider?
Will the terms of employment be exactly the same about how I advance to better positions? And in terms of pay, I'd like to point this out, Adam, that the fees that they promise, the money that they give us, is $30,000 a year at the assistant manager position. So $400 of deficit is essentially $5,000 a year, which is a huge drop down from 30 to 25 because the initial figure isn't that huge. So we could discuss further if the terms of employment are exactly the same.
Sure, and I would say that with regards to the terms of the contract, I'm simply a director at Victory Sports, so I cannot speak for what PerformX is actually contracting on. But what I can assure you is the fact that when we are going to be providing the training, and I will personally oversee the fact that you get the best training that we can offer through JWI. This will be something that's up to par, and this is something that will allow you in the long term to make up for any pay differential that you're experiencing in the short term. Is this something that you are okay with?
Before we move forward, if I sense this correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong. Are you telling me that sister facility is not being planned at Victory because you're the director of Victory? Are there absolutely no negotiations going on, or is there absolutely no plan in place where you are going to be planning a sister facility? Is that what you're saying? Which is why you're offering me alternative employment?
To the best of my knowledge, no, there isn't. And Harvey, please correct me if I'm wrong, but no one has sent me an update. And if there is a sister company being formed, then I would like to find out as well, to find out what exactly is happening. And I will ask JWI about it. If there is, then we'll be more than happy to perhaps talk to you about that. But at this juncture, no, I do not have any information pertaining to that.
Just to clarify, at this point in time, again, the lack of information available to us means that we cannot talk about sister facilities for Victory Sports. However, we can talk about parallel organizations that can offer you the sort of opportunities you're looking for and the sort of avenue for you to pursue the passions that you enjoy. So we're really hoping that this is something that can meet your needs right now.
So in terms of the pay that you were proposing, do you think it can exactly be the same that it was in Victory Sports?
I would have to say no at this point, actually, unfortunately. But we can put in place systems, and Harvey, please add on. I think what I've been saying is the fact that we are willing to put in place measures, and actually even more measures just beyond just a training program, because we value our employees. And I will send all these things that I'm taking away, not anything confidential, but the learning points as to how we can fine-tune our own performance standards to JWI to ensure that these are further clarified down the road, and perhaps with our own parallel organizations.
If you're interested in, but I think more importantly, what we really want to ask first is this sort of option the sort of thing that you would be agreeable to? And if we can at least agree on that in principle, then perhaps we can figure out how best to work with the terms that you're really interested in.
So the kind of offer that you're offering my client, I think the kind of work obviously is something that my client would definitely be interested in. However, the pay differential is something that we have to negotiate on. Moreover, the training that you're willing to offer, the implementation of that training and the checking of the standard also needs to be done at the same time. So since there is already a performance standard in the company, what we were thinking of is at both times, Rhythm has been at high positions in the company. So can there be an external complaints committee which can review the performance of the employees, and then the review can be sent back to the company for evaluation?
That's a good idea. We were thinking about that. We were thinking of actually implementing an open reporting hotline. Perhaps a simple number would be 1-800-VICTORY within our company, and moving forward maybe 1-800-GWI. Anything along those lines. This would be an anonymous reporting line. If employees feel uncomfortable with the current performance standards, they feel they're being overworked, if it's something they cannot perform up to par with, we will encourage them to report this. They'll be protected, their employment won't be affected. There'll be an internal investigation in the HR department, and then such reports will be published. They'll be made known to the entire company, to all the employees, so that everyone is held accountable, especially the top tier management of JWI and within Victory Sports, so that I am held accountable as well.
Definitely. I mean, not to want to put you out of a job, David, but it's not in our interest, especially not JWI's or Rhythm's interest, to have to keep coming back to a mediation table to deal with employees who might find dissatisfaction with their work, and we'd very much like to be able to work together with them so we can continue their employment amicably.
Just to clarify, what Pat was proposing is that we like your idea about a hotline being in place, but we feel the problem lies where you say that in the last 6 months you've not received any complaints. Is because at some level, and I don't think it's the right way to look at it, but it turns into a David and Goliath battle. Because when, let's say, you're the director and someone's a lower level manager or just a mere employee, they're afraid what their odds at being in the organization are. Which is why what Pat was proposing is there be an external complaints committee where it's not the people in JWI or that client concern, but people apart from it, so that there can be neutrality in the process. So that helps you and every other employee in the process as well.
So if I could just interrupt you for a second, and I love the fact that we're talking about something that helps other people out, that's great. But I believe that the offer that was originally made and we started to discuss was the potential of working for JWI at another facility.
Performax, yes.
Performax. But then I don't want us to get too bogged down into the details of complaint lines for the Victory facility, if that's the case.
So really, if we could, I mean, I think we started to make a little bit of headway. If we kind of go back and refocus on that offer and see, what's agreeable to you, what's not, and why, and what we can do kind of on both sides of that.
There's just one little thing that I'd like to say, is that you say you do not have any information yet if there's going to be a sister facility. If we can in principle agree that if, let's say, in the next 1 or 2 years, that is where you are at in terms of expansions, then you restore me to that position in a sister facility at Victory Sports for the time being, because I'd still have to be employed and still make a livelihood. In terms of an alternative employment opportunity, if it can be on the exact same terms, and let's say I do get promoted at Performax, I am given the same position when I join the Victory Sports facility. And why I say this is that in the long run, and you understand this, is when on your resume you say that you work for a bigger organization in the same position vis-a-vis a smaller organization, then your prospects of improvement and the prospects of your social standing are much bigger. Which is why when David said there's a glint in my eye, it's because I like working for Victory Sports, and I've never been afraid of the work. I understand that there have been problems, but if in principle you can agree that once a sister facility is planned, that is where I will be working.
So just to clarify, you've given us a timeline of say 1 to 2 years to inform you there is a sister facility coming up. But what do you have in mind for that interim period of in between that 1 to 2 years? I'd like to hear a bit more specificity about it.
Let's say if you're not planning a sister facility, then let's say I will be willing to accept an offer on the exact same terms wherein I was working with Victory Sports. In that period, I believe that you will not terminate my employment, and I'd be willing to go through the 90 days period based on which I will have promotions to assistant manager.
Okay, this is very interesting, and I do want to find common ground with you. I just need to understand some things better. You keep talking about wanting to contract on the exact same terms. I would just like to know better, why exactly does contracting on the exact same terms matter so much? Is it the option of performing within 90 days? Is it the higher pay by $5,000 per year? What exactly is it?
Is it every single term in your current agreement, or is there a specific term that you want us to keep just for you?
In principle, it's the entire agreement, because I want to be asked the same things and I want to be able to deliver better. I understand that since you will not be the director at that sister facility, our client concern for GWI, there will be different terms proposed. In principle, I would not be willing to let go of the current pay that I get. One thing that I would be willing to do is, instead of joining as an assistant manager, I can go through a 90-day period, a 3-month period, where I get the same pay, but I'm not given the designation. And of course, it's the money that matters, because $30,000 in and of itself is not a lot of money, and it just barely makes me meet my ends.
I'm sorry, just to clarify. So we're hearing a lot of your concerns, which is excellent. And I think that's very heartening for this process. But with regards to the specific amount that you're making right now, I'd just like to clarify. And you did touch on that a little bit. But why exactly does this specific amount have to be maintained in your move from job to job? I say this, I think both of us as attorneys will understand, if we were to find other employers as well, we would very likely have to take a bit of a pay cut along the way. It's just what happens commercially. So we're just curious, I think both Rhythm and I are really curious as to why this specific value is of such importance to you.
I think it's a very simple explanation in terms that when I presented my resume to GWI, and when they put me up with Victory Sports, obviously you thought and you deemed that I was deserving of those $30,000. To go back on it, because we had a disagreement, puts me in a slightly disadvantageous position. And I'm not really asking for an increment, I'm asking for the same amount of money. Because as you see, that to go back on it and to get back to a figure of $30,000 will again take me some time. All I'm saying is, it has taken me a decent amount of experience to reach this figure of 30. Just because there's an agreement, I do not want to, negotiate that.
And Harvey, as you obviously know, I've worked in 3 firms now after I've taken up advocacy. I think anyone moving from one firm to another would take a cut. I think they obviously would prefer an increment. So my client, as he rightly said, is not preferring an increment. However, he would want to maintain the same pay at least.
I think we are making good headway here by at the very least discussing the prospect of maybe an alternative company. But I would like to clarify that the very fact that we are offering a sister company also means that the standards might differ, and insofar as the issue underlying this entire session is the fact that there were certain problems in meeting the standards that I set within the Victory Sports facility, would imply that perhaps going into another company would mean that the standards would differ, and accordingly the pace therein would also differ. And I think, Arista, and I'm sure you'll be able to appreciate this as well, not all companies are similarly sized. Victory Sports is very clearly the largest facility within India, and if we were to move you to Performex, for example, the pay is going to differ just because of the smaller size in relative comparison to Victory Sports. That is not to say that the pay is grossly undervalued. It is something that I think is still very respectable, and that is why I cut down the figure to say that it is merely just over $400 devaluation from the current salary per month, because it goes to show that per month the pay that you're getting would be above $2,000. So I would like to understand why exactly the value 30,000 holds so much value. Is there any financial difficulties you're experiencing? Is there any other way that we can help you?
Okay, so is there any particular time frame in mind that you might suggest that you can implement in the system in the Perform Max facility that can be implemented by the company, so that after a particular time, with the performance of my client remains as per the standards, the pay that my client is getting right now can be restored? Is that something you'd be willing to take up?
Sorry, we're really hearing your concern about a timeline, but for right now, we really appreciate to hear what Arista has to say in regards to William's questions about the pay first.
In terms of that question, Rhythm, the very simple fact that I explained earlier is that it has taken me a decent amount of experience for you to have offered me that money. And in terms of my employment, my potential employment at Performex, I see it as a temporary arrangement, because the underlying principal agreement that we have is that in a few years' time, when you're planning expansion, I get back to Victory Sports. So let's say Performex in and of itself cannot meet a $30,000 figure, and because it's, according to you, a figure as meager as $400, would JWI consider me their employee, because I still am, and either Victory Sports or JWI pitches in that $400 a month. So I'm in the position that I want to be in, and it doesn't hurt you either.
I think we're hearing a lot of your concerns with regards to getting a parity in terms of your pay moving forward into the future. And I think we've already highlighted the difficulty that we're facing right now with negotiating that pretty little bit of pay in terms of discrepancies. That being said, I think we were talking about earlier about negotiations for maybe the reduced amount right now for increases in the future that are commensurate with the promotions.
Oh yes, that's true. So there were certain things that we were thinking of as well. Besides just the training phase, we were also thinking of perhaps when we do send you into, when you do go to Performex, perhaps an arrangement could be made where you can be tagged to, let's say, a director or deputy director, so that he can directly supervise you to ensure that all the training that you are going through is something that is that's productive, is producing results. Moving forward, the current, I think, the general approach to promotions and salaries is the fact that after 18 months, such things are, the promotions and increments in salaries are based on performance results. And so that will of course differ from company to company. And as a director of Victory Sports, I cannot speak for Performex. But what I am telling you is that the window of time that Pat was talking about is 18 months. And so when it comes to trying to maximize your value in a separate company, it's all these options that we are trying to suggest to show you that we do care about your employment, but there are certain commercial realities that we also have to abide by. We cannot ignore the fact that ultimately Performex is only going to be putting forth a certain annual salary. That is something that we have to abide by. And moving forward, we will try to improve your prospects of increasing the salaries through promotions and pay increments.
So if I get this right, what you're proposing is that I join at $25,000,
Yes.
And later, in a term of 18 months, you promote me and I match a figure possibly higher than 30.
It could very well be the case, provided that we continue our ongoing negotiations with Performex.
Once again, one thing that I'd like to stress is that why I repeatedly stress on that the 30,000 salary that I was promised is because when you see at $400 a month as a standalone figure or $5,000, it might not seem like a lot, but a drop from 30 to 25 in my paradigm is something that will put me in a disadvantageous position, because there's certain expenses that have to be met. So what we were proposing is that if Performax cannot meet that salary, can GWI pitch in those $5,000?
I think that is something that we are willing to consider and we can bring back to GWI to think about. And ultimately, I feel that the caveat that has to be drawn here is the fact that everything that you are requesting for right now in terms of topping up the lack of pay is something that will be based on performance at the end of the day. So I can say that we're willing to consider this, but I'm in no way guaranteeing you, and please don't take it the wrong way, I cannot simply guarantee you the fact that we are willing to top up any differences in pay.
So I think that's extremely dependent on what the internal conversation in JWI is. And let's say if it is an acceptable proposal from our side, then I think both of us are happy with that arrangement. Once again, the principal agreement being that in due course of time, I come back to Victory Sports for the sister facility.
Of course, this is dependent on what we can take home to JWI. And of course, we can always come back to another mediation session to hammer out further those details once we have the information on hand. But that being said, with regards to getting more concrete solutions on the table, is there anything else that that you'd be interested in with regards to that pay discrepancy? Are there any other options you'd be interested in, such as what we've talked about accepting this slightly lower amount in return for greater training, in return for greater increases later on in the future? Would this be something that you're amenable to? Granted, of course, that we would still be definitely be amenable to negotiating with Performax together with you.
Okay, so as far as I've understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, the pay that you're offering him as of now is $25,000, and that is due to the training that you would be providing him when he moves to that facility, right? So what can be done is a good way to test that whether that training is effective or not can be performance-based incentives that can be instilled in the payment system at that facility. Would that be something that JWI would be willing to look at?
This is something that I think is really outside the realm of my control. It is something that I can suggest, of course. These are very creative and interesting ideas that I think should be implemented actually, because of course performance-based pay increments are something that everyone would like to work for. Even I would prefer that. But yes, this is something that is totally out of my control. I will bring this back to JWI for sure. And speaking of which, I feel that we have so many things going on right now. We need to be able to get things down on the paper so that we can keep track of what we are discussing.
I think Adam can join
Yes,
in.
David,
And to that end, I wanted to make sure that I understand this from my own clarification. You asked, we've asked several times, or at least you've asked several times about the pay increases and what have you at this other facility, the Performax facility.
Yes.
And if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you saying is that's not something you can guarantee simply because while you do work for JWI and that is a JWI managed facility, as you're not the director, you don't really have any control over it.
Yes.
But on the other half of that, and again, if I hear you wrong, if I'm wrong, let me know. Your interest is really to stay with Victory if you could, which doesn't look at the moment like that's a possibility, but you are open to moving over to Performax as long as there are certain things that are met, which would include promotions, pay raises, and what have you. And did I hear you earlier ask about the possibility of moving over to another Victory facility if, in fact, another Victory facility is built? Okay, so and you were okay with working at Performax in the meantime while that's fleshed out if it ever comes to play?
Certainly.
Okay, so did we ever answer that question? I'm just curious. So if another facility is built and if Arista does agree to work at this other Performax facility, is that an option that is on the table for you as far as being able to allow them to move over to that other Victory facility if and when it is ever built, open, what have you?
It is on the table, but of course you will have to find out first whether or not this is the facility is even being constructed.
Just to clarify, the reason we're adopting this position is simply because we have that paucity of information.
Yes.
But going back, if that ever becomes apparent, definitely we'll be bringing back up that back up to you.
Yes.
Okay, so that being said, how would we like to kind of strike or add to what we have already? Obviously, we haven't touched the soup because we haven't figured out, what's gone on already, and we've kind of skipped past standards a little bit, and we've gone on to a possibility of another company, right? A Performax. Yes. So really, if we're discussing Performax, how would you like to? What
what can we flesh out around that? Obviously, we've discussed it, it's something that you could be potentially interested in, and we have that limited information, so we can't really discuss, from what it sounds like, the exacts of pay increases. We know the initials. What more would you like to know, or what more would you like to discuss really around that, as far as kind of cementing that as, you know, something we can get done today, and then we can focus on the rest of it if we have time today, or we can focus on it later.
I think the salary, the training period, and the timeline that you proposed for promotions is something that, you know, we just need to chalk out. They've proposed 25,000, and you know they want to get back in talks with GWI if they can pitch in that $5,000, so it meets my expenses. Apart from that, they said that their general industry standard is 18 months, after which a promotion is granted. If we can negotiate a contract, so then I get a promotion, which can be dependent on various factors if they're willing to discuss it.
And the judgment of the performance, or if there are any complaints being done by the external complaints committee?
Oh yes, absolutely. We definitely don't want to forget about that. So I think if I could clarify, maybe we could just keep these things in sum. Right now, we want to have a sort of either hotline or external committee, and really we can work these details out later on, because I understand time is running short for this session. So we want to have an external body, in effect, being able to handle anonymous complaints, future complaints from individuals such as Arista, so JWI can take steps to ensure that their employment is without issue. Right. So that's the first thing that we really want, that we really agreed on, which I think is very positive. Maybe David, would like to put that up on the board as a...
So what we've added so far is just under performance. I've just added it as you were speaking. So we've got, and this is a little small.
Nice.
We already have a promotion timeline and a method of handling complaints.
Right.
Is what we've agreed need to be some things we need to discuss.
Very
So
much.
let's make good use of the time we have left. You sound like you're probably much closer to being agreeable on the complaint methodology.
Yes,
So
yeah.
if we're going to talk about the complaint methodology, you're obviously open to it. You talked about a 1-800 number and what have you, and that sounds like something that obviously you're interested in as well, and seeing happen. So what other kind of details? Let's flesh out a little bit more around the details. What can we do around that to really help?
Arista, I think I would like to hear from you. Is there anything else that you find lacking within the company?
All I think is when you say that, you know, performance standards are being met and nobody has a problem with them, while we propose an external complaints committee, and you know this doesn't just affect me, but everyone involved under you, is that once there is an external committee, the members come from various companies. For example, if GWI has 10 clients, then what it can possibly do is, if there's a complaint being generated in the Victory facility, people who hear the merits of that complaint be clients from different facilities, right? So for example, a problem generated in Performax is heard by members of Victory or Performax or other clients that you possibly have, which is how there's never a David Goliath situation when people are actually able to speak up, perform better, and not be under any sort of mental stress.
So just to clarify, this is an issue really of a more public accountability.
Right.
Would that be right?
Yeah, that's something I'm open to. So besides just a hotline and external committee, we can have more accountability by maybe giving some form of assurance, and maybe this is something we can draft up in a memorandum of understanding in some way, shape or form, and that's something Pat and Harvey can hammer out the details later on in the session.
We can surely talk about different principles that we really want to enshrine in terms of dealing with employees. I think that's definitely something we will both be agreeable on.
That'd be wonderful.
So I'm hearing a lot of agreements in principle effectively. Right? We're going to be working very closely with you to make sure that your employment continues in as uninterrupted a way as possible, or maybe even in a way that you can flourish as well. So granted that these are a lot of details that we're going to have to keep on working on and we can come back to later on. Up until that point, given that we've had this agreement in principle, does that mean that I just want to talk about what's left on the agenda? Does that mean that this suit that you have, this claim that you're making right now, this is something that you will drop once we've met all of these?
Certainly, once you go back to GWI and let's say in principle we've agreed to all the terms, then I think the first thing that I do is drop the lawsuit and continue my work.
Right.
I think in a future session, because David, I think we're running short on time.
I think
one
we are.
thing I'd like to discuss is the timeline for my promotions, the standards for promotions, and how there can be generalization of standards and intricate details regarding that. But I think there's a lot of principle agreement.
So let's agree to this. We'll pick a date as we finish here that we can come back and do this. And in the meantime, as far as things that we both know that we need to work on, or we all know we need to work on, let's all take those back. So if you could, I mean, you would like to talk about that promotion timeline and that salary increase timeline. So if you would like to work with your counsel in the meantime and kind of work out some details about what you'd like to see, some more concrete details. And at the same time, if you would do the same, I think that when we come together, the more details that we really have specifically about what you want, the faster we're going to come to a resolution on these issues. And the same with the promotion timeline, the same with the ability possibly of moving back to JWI, what you would like to see and what you would need to make those two things happen.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think I would like to thank both of you for coming in and staying nice and calm for us today. And other than that, we'll set a date here shortly and we'll all meet together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.